The first thing I did is camera's on.
Yeah, this is it. All right, this is George with Talkin podcast, and this week I've got Jack Lonergan, and Jack has been a bass player and a keys player for a good number of years now, involved with the big project he's involved with is Let's Zepp, which is a Led Zeppelin tribute, Mirror Signal, Stephen Bamadelli, and Ben Bellwood as well. So how you doing, Jack?
Yeah, pretty good. Just been able to spend a month back down in our hometown, which has been really nice, especially in the summer. And yeah, a lot of musicians around and a lot of old faces and good players. So it doesn't get a lot better than that, really.
No, it doesn't. Like I know because Jack is from Weymouth, like me, and we've known each other since we were about you were maybe about 9 or 10, I think, when we first met, and I was probably 12 or 13 when I started to come around, or might have even been slightly younger.
I think it was a little younger because I think neither of us were musicians by the time, but like when we met.
Yeah.
That long ago.
Yeah.
I don't remember a time before I was a musician, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, to give you a very brief backstory, I met Jack through his sister. Me and his sister were good friends at school, and she'd have little gatherings, and we'd all just sort of turn up. And actually, just thinking about it, like connecting it into the music thing, and before we were even musicians, Jack's dad is a bit of a legendary local figure, Chris Lonergan, and I remember coming round to yours for get-togethers, and Chris would be walking through the door, either bringing his gear in and out, and like so. At that age, did it sort of come into your mind that you thought you might want to be a musician one day, or did your dad ever sort of?
There wasn't really any push from my parents because they were very much of the idea that like they got to do what they liked in their lives by either taking chances for themselves as musicians or being able to pursue something they wanted. Yeah. So they were keen not to push me in any direction, and so I was actually I didn't want to be a musician at all as a kid. I was really into video games, so I went through this kind of few stages of denial that turned me into a musician, which is I wanted to make video games, and then once the music stuff was happening, I wanted to make music for video games, and then I was like, okay, now I just want to write music, and I was like, actually, no, I'm just going to play music live. And so I kind of fell into it that way. It was mainly secondary school, actually, that got me into music, because that was the first time I had friends who were kind of part of a musical, like, subculture, which is how I got into kind of rock and metal music. And that was, once that got its hooks with me, that was a reason to pick up a bass. So, my dad loves telling this story, even though it makes me sound horrible. But apparently when I was 12, I went up to him and said, Dad, I want to learn bass, but I don't want to learn it from you. Yeah. So that was, that's a point of pride for him.
Yeah. Was that because like the style of bass playing that your dad was playing wasn't to what you wanted to do, or is it because you just didn't want to learn from your dad?
No, it was the first one, definitely, because I didn't back then I didn't see the connections between like music from kind of like the 50s, 60s and 70s and the stuff that I wanted to play, which felt like a totally different kettle of fish. And now that I'm older and hopefully wiser, I see the kind of connections between those things and how it helps to be able to play Motown if you're a bass player, whether you're playing Motown or not on a gig, or how if you just learn how to run up and down a minor scale or a pentatonic scale as a guitarist, you will just sound like all the other guitarists who do that. But you could stay in that same style if it was metal or whatever, but learn some stuff about soul and learn some stuff about like jazz harmony or something like that, without having to totally change your playing. You can just adapt it into your playing and become a better metal musician, for example. You know.
Yeah.
Back then, I didn't see that, so I was like, I don't want to go down the wrong path and learn like old man bass, and then instead I just wanted to get the kind of more modern stuff. Now I spend most of my time playing old man bass, so
Yeah.
it was a mistake I had to make, but
Yeah.
there is a part of me that wishes I kind of got hold of that a bit earlier, so I could have kind of specialised a little more.
Yeah, I'm so with you there. I think I didn't have a period. Well, initially in the beginning, like all of us, we sort of gravitate towards the things that prick our ears out and sound exceptional in some kind of way, whether it be the technique, the technical aspect, or the harmony and the complexity of more advanced music. And you're like, oh, well, I want to go and figure that out.
Yeah,
that's what I want to do. And I now, having come full circle, for some years in terms of what I enjoy out of music, and it sounds like it's a similar thing with you, is that having a strong foundation in those styles only informs you and helps you to play the more advanced stuff even better.
There's one thing that I think is a good lesson for any musician at all, or anyone who has to practice something that's like a fine motor skill, is if you want to do it fast, practice it slow, as slow as you can.
Yeah.
But I think taking that mentality as well, if you want to do crazy stuff and you want to be at the edges of whatever art form it is that you're in, then it pays to pay attention to the simple stuff, or the old stuff, or the foundation stuff, because I think even now I can find myself wanting to get into more of the like jazz piano style things where I'm playing chords in my left hand and kind of melody improvising in the right, which is I'm still in that mindset of run before I can walk, and I keep trying to learn the crazy stuff. And weirdly, I know it would be easier to slow down and learn the really simple stuff, get into that for a few months, and then that would take me further forward. But I still have that resistance to it. It's like, no, I want to do the fun stuff. I want to jump in the deep end.
For sure. Yeah, no, I get you. I've found for me, and how I worked through that problem earlier on, was to try and find joy in the simple stuff and try and execute that as well as I could, and really pay attention to just trying to play those 2 or 3 notes that you've got to play well and in time, and making those feel good. I had a rehearsal last night with a band, and I always really pay attention to what the drummer's doing, and just sort of, say I'm playing a rhythm guitar part, and I'm just kind of what I would call like chinking through some chords. I'm doing the little chinks on the 2 and the 4, like 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever.
Yeah.
And when I'm doing something like that and I'm just playing a really simple part, I'm actually just trying to really zoom in to what the drummer's doing, and trying just to lock in with him.
Yeah.
And lock in with the bass player and the other members of the band. And I find if I do that, I have more fun doing the simple stuff than if I was just a sound and going, oh God, I'm just,
I said this to a friend, last night actually. He's a drummer, and he was talking about playing boring parts, and I just had I must have stolen it from somewhere, but it just popped. This phrase popped into my head. There's no such thing as a boring part. There's just boring players. I think the truth is, like, if you can play a ton of notes, or you have something really busy or complicated to do, you're not really exposed, because you've got the amount of notes and the speed of things is really doing a lot of the impressing the audience for you. So if you are doing that just chinks on the 2 and 4, and the drummer is really locked into a groove, and you're not, then you're going to make him sound bad, and that's going to make the whole thing sound bad. And people don't appreciate it, because they go, well, it's simple, it must be easy.
Yeah.
It's like simple and easy are not the same things, especially in music.
Not. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I've heard this saying by another guitar player, but I might get it wrong, but it's something along the lines of simplicity is the height of sophistication.
Yeah.
The more something that you can break it down to the sum of its parts and deliver it in a way that really connects with the listener, that's the most sophisticated way that you could do it. And I definitely feel like that there is a lot to that, and I find there's more to that. Saying the longer that I've been playing and involved with music, I'm like, okay, I could play a bunch of notes, but how can I not do that? How can I just sort of, because just referring to this band practice I had again last night, there was a tune that we were playing where I had to take a solo, and it's like modulating between F major and B flat minor, which is kind of a sort of interesting modulation that can be quite fun to play over if you sort of get it feeling nice for yourself. But I remember sort of going into it in the rehearsal, kind of just playing, just for lack of a better term, too many notes. Because I was just sort of like trying to feel my way through the change of what's working. How am I going to navigate through this sort of thing? And
putting all the sauces on the burger.
All the sauces, literally. Just smashing the relish, smashing the burger sauce, getting the ketchup on there, everything, like mustard.
You can't even see the patty at the end of it.
No.
Oh yeah, I've done that many times.
Yeah, you do. And you after the second time we rehearsed the song and it got to the solo, I just was like, okay, you've had your blow. Now try and say a bit of something with less.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that to me was when it started to sound less contrived and less sort of thought about. A little bit more vocal and a bit more musical. So there's a lot to simplicity.
I also think it is worth, because this is the conversation we're having now is, while it's a really useful one, it is a very common one to just have that one side of the argument. Whereas I'd say the other side's important too, where like that idea of contrivance and complexity and finding out what is almost like the simple version of what does every one of the 12 notes sound like over this chord.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you know the pentatonic works over it, whichever one, then you can just play that and you'll never need to get out that zone. And then on the other end, if you are randomly trying all 12 notes and not listening to how they interact, then you're just playing a different piece of random 12-tone music over whatever this song is, you know?
Yeah.
I think like there's definitely there's a case to be made of like doing both with intent, because if you just play the minor pentatonic without any notes outside of it, anything added to it, but you do it with real intention and clarity and like a voice to what you're doing, you don't need another scale. You don't need more than 5 notes to play over it, and you can actually have a really good variety of sounds just by choosing how this kind of small palette can be expressive rather than just autopilot.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of it, when you are talking about like all 12 notes played with some kind of intention as well, then whatever place you start from with that 12 note, you can carve a voice through to the kind of harmonically satisfying stuff from that one weird note that you've started from. And that's the whole Victor Wooten thing. You're only one note away from a right note at any point. So that, for me, that was a big part of exploring kind of the non-diatonic stuff, or, you know, when, like you were saying, that F to B flat minor, like chord moves like that. It's finding the kind of sweet spots between the weird stuff and the satisfying stuff.
100%.
But it's all about, you have to be present with it. You have to be paying attention to what you're playing and what you're trying to say, so to speak, musically.
Sure.
Then the complex stuff teaches you the upper limit. It kind of increases your max speed on the road. Yeah. So if you do need to get on the motorway, so to speak, then you're not going to struggle, because you can play faster, you can play harder stuff,
Mm.
you can understand more complex ideas. That helps you to swim and not sink in a lot of situations.
Sure.
But then you kind of have to know your minimum speed as well. Like how kind of economically can I play while still making it sound like me, you know?
I'm totally with you there. Something came to mind with something you just said towards the end was about, I heard Steve Vai say something once where he was kind of saying that practicing this really complex stuff enables me to play the simple stuff with more conviction and more authority, you know, and that's something that definitely holds weight, you know, and that is just one of the things where, you know, if you just live in not simple land, I don't want to sort of say that, but if you keep everything just here,
simple and complex is its own thing.
Yeah, and if you just keep everything here, then you haven't got the weight and depth of what is potentially a bigger dynamic.
Yeah.
And that's what we're kind of talking about here for me is dynamics.
Yeah.
Whether, you know, when I'm playing, I'm paying attention to dynamics in several forms.
Yeah.
How, you know, the tone obviously is one dynamic pool that you can take things from. The volume is a big one.
Yeah.
Speed is another one. Like if I'm ever playing with another guitar player, and we're both, this is just one example of how I could contrast something, and I hear them playing like really fast or something, I will deliberately play really slow and just play 2 or 3 notes back.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, or if they're doing something really slow, I might. I think the other way around is less. It's less appealing because if the other guitar player is playing just a few vocal notes, I might be more inclined to call and respond with that kind of thing. But it's just about those light and shades, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Things.
I think there's an important thing I don't think is easy to remember for most people, or some people don't even know. Like the word dynamic, it means like things changing. So you having one dynamic level, if you're always playing simple and like single rate stuff, like everything you play is 8th notes and it's always the pentatonic scale that fits.
Sure.
Or if you're always playing super fast and super loud, you have no kind of off switch, then those aren't dynamics, that's a dynamic. Because there's nothing to change, there's no light or shade to kind of compare things against. And the thing I always found, I was really obsessed, me and this chef that I used to live with, we were really close. I was one of the best men at his wedding. So it's like, we built up that friendship, like that close bond, through watching music and listening to music together. Like the big one was a live performance of Still Got the Blues by Gary Moore. And the melody for that and all the little pieces he puts in the background underneath his singing, they're all very simple, but they're all really bombastically played right up until he wants to make it romantic and sweet and pulls that volume right down. And that makes it, he's not changing the speed, he's not changing how complex the notes are, he's changing how much of his guitar he's giving you to make that same sound.
Yeah.
But he's not changing all the other things. That should have one dynamic change, really kind of breaks your heart. Then he's playing this kind of blues style ballad for I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes. Then he brings that same melody back in, but it evolves into a solo. So that's when that simple harmony starts to become more complex. The speed starts to crank up, and then once he's kind of overwhelming you with this really incredible playing, then he brings it all right back down, back to slow and quiet and soft. And that kind of takes you from, wow, I'm seeing something amazing, to being brought right back into an emotional space. And I think that's, a lot of people say like shred and fast playing can't be emotional. And I don't buy it. I just think it's like, you can't just do it and expect people to like it. You have to sell it to them. You have to kind of create something, and the way to do that is dynamics, like
Yeah.
controlling how you change your playing while you're doing it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I'm so with you there. And he's a great example. He was actually mentioned in another podcast that I did, the first one with a guy who's a guy called Alex Ainsworth, who's a great player, and he's very Gary Moore influenced, and we brought him up, and yeah, I mean, just his intensity of the delivery when he's at full tilt is incredible, really, and it's done in such a way that transcends the idea that what he's showing you here is a technique, or you're not really necessarily taken aback by the skill of it. At least that's my first impression. Of course, you like any guitarist that I hear that is implementing speed or technique in that kind of way, when I hear them playing, if the first thing that I think about isn't the fact that they are playing fast or something like that, then that to me shows that they've transcended what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
If at any moment I hear somebody just kind of going through something and I'm like, I can hear what you're doing there, and it's not really musical, it's not really framed, and I think you mentioned that's how it's how you frame what you're trying to say.
Precisely.
It's literally like reading a sentence off of a page. The way that it's the delivery of it that makes it. That for me is that shelves off quite a number of guitar players, in the sense that there are many that can play quite a lot of things, but it's a smaller group of individuals that can really frame it in such a way that it touches people.
Absolutely.
And that's what I think it should be about at its core.
Yeah, I think I'm a pretty fundamentalist in my belief that like music is a language. It's not like it behaves like a language or anything like it. I think music's the only kind of audio language that you don't have to learn the words in order to get the meaning of it, the intention, even if it's not a literal intention like I am thirsty or I want to go here. Like the thing with the idea of things being tasteful or well communicated or well framed is exactly the same as if you're talking to someone and making a point. And I think with this idea of like simplicity and complexity, a couple of years ago, I kind of predictably got diagnosed with quite heavy ADHD, and a part of that is if my mind is going, I always thought was a normal speed, picking up ideas and putting things together, and then trying to then talk to people without coming into the room like, hi, I'm Jack, I'm talking about all these things, going so fast that some people can't even catch up with it. I've had to learn different techniques of ways to communicate ideas without going like straight past not their understanding. Everyone can understand what it is I'm saying until I get into really weird territory. But it's the idea of matching someone at their pace. Like if I want to talk fast to somebody, I either have to already know that is their natural rhythm, that they're in that space, which is usually why it's fun to talk to drunk people, because they're more in that, they're less inhibited. So that's a funny thing when you're sober with ADHD and you're with someone who's drunk and you're like, finally you can keep up and I don't have to edit this. But the truth is, like, it's the same as if I was just to talk as completely unfiltered as I wanted to. It would be the same as the guy stood at the front of the stage just playing his scales as fast as he can, not listening to any of the rest of the band.
Sure.
And you're at the end of it, you're thinking, that was a cool band, and I wonder who that guitarist at the front was as well. They're not communicating together. And if I don't have that, like, if the person I'm talking to, needs things more calm, then I have to actively slow it down and kind of break ideas down. And that's been really useful in helping me organise my own thoughts and ideas compared to kind of the chaos of when I was younger. And I think it's the same thing with music and with any art. If you're having a lot of ideas or you're interested in a lot of things, like finding ways to focus it down so it can be communicated well is really good. And the classic way to do this. Find other people who do that. It's not a guitar one, but a really, really great example of someone who can do that excellently is Bill Evans. I think the way he plays piano, whether he's going ultra top speed or incredibly soft and gentle, it's always Bill Evans. It's always got that like, oh, I know it's you and I know what he's trying to say. Even if it's mind-blowing, I'm along for the ride because it's so well communicated.
Absolutely. Yeah, what a great example. I absolutely adore Bill Evans. He's one of my all-time favourite musicians, and my first exposure to him was Kind of Blue, and instantly within the first song, is it So What, the first song on that album? And the opening to that, just the first few tinkles of the piano and just the way that, you know, he comes in and then, you know, like Blue and Green is just this beautiful composition. I know there's some disparity as to who actually wrote that, whether it's Bill or Miles. Miles says he wrote it, Bill says he wrote it.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm of the belief that Bill did.
You can hear
I would
it.
like to think that Bill did and I could hear it.
I might be wrong, but I totally agree. We might be wrong, but it's you can hear it in there's something in the voice of it, and that's the thing. He's communicated so well in all his other compositions that we are both sure, with no evidence apart from how it sounds, because that's his sound.
Sure.
And
yeah, absolutely. There's what else do I love on that album of his playing flamenco sketches?
Yeah, that's great.
And then outside of that, Someday My Prince Will Come is just like this beautiful sort of thing that ruses from the beginning, you know, just beautiful melodic ideas, and yeah, he's just he was the man to me as far as piano is concerned. I mean, there's other pianists that I absolutely love, jazz pianists, but in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Like Oscar Peterson. I remember the first clip that I saw of Oscar Peterson that totally rocked my world was a live thing of his at Ronnie Scott's,
I know
in the 70s.
Yeah, I think I know the one you mean.
And he comes in with this like arpeggio sequence that covers the entire breadth of the piano.
Wearing his big gold watches and everything.
Yeah.
You're like, that's like weight training.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you do that with like a fat Rolex and like chains going up to there?
Yeah, he's all blinged up. And he's just absolutely tearing it through, but in such a beautiful way. I think again, you know, like he's transcending the idea that this is just technical wizardry. It's beautiful as well.
Yeah.
And the Thelonious Monk for his personality and his character.
Yeah.
That comes across so strongly when he plays in a different sort of way. So like with you, Jax, I know like you initially like you started off with life as a bass player.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a point in time we actually lived together for a short while.
Yeah, about a month or so. Yeah.
Just only a month. When you were in London, you were graceful enough to put me up.
Yeah.
Back in 2014 or 15,
that makes sense,
something like that. And I remember then, like you'd already been playing keys for a few years.
Yeah.
Is that right? When you sort of start it up?
I mean, the funny thing is this comes to another. This is a good transition from people who are incredibly talented but have their ability to kind of slow things down and make things soft. Julie Lewis, the piano teacher at Budmouth, is also a musician in Weymouth scene and has played with my mum, Tanya Lonergan, a lot. You guys have played together. Yeah. I actually had both of you on my 2019 birthday gig, which was a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah.
She when I joined secondary school, Mum just signed me up for piano lessons. So I'd go for an hour once a week to go and learn piano. I was like, I don't really know why I'm doing this, because I hadn't started playing bass yet. And was just picking up basic things, and then that kind of tapered off, and I got into bass. So I had this like foundation, very, very simple foundation of how the piano worked. Then learned bass on top of that. And as I got more into bands like Muse and, you know, bands like rock bands who would also move to a keyboard and stuff like that, I'd start to try and write songs in similar ways and come up with similar things. So I was kind of very slowly learning keyboards for about, I don't know, 10 years. And then while I was at university, there was no keyboard program. So everyone who needed a keys player for their gigs would either have to hire someone really bad or would hire one of the really, really busy people.
Yeah.
So I found a nice little midpoint where I was just good enough to do the gigs, but not so good that I was busy all the time, so I could get booked.
You were in the Goldilocks zone.
Exactly. And all that time as well, I'm getting into harmony, and my understanding of things is getting broader. And on bass, without going really high up, even on like a 6-string bass, which I used to have, you don't have that freedom to hear how all the notes work together.
Yeah. And
piano and keyboards are just like a harmonic wonderland. You can just, everything you want to hear, you can just hit it. And if you can't reach it, hold the pedal and go and hit more. It's a very easy instrument to explore harmonically. It's even compared to guitar. You're locked in with guitar in standard tuning and in other tunings. It's a tough instrument to get harmonically deep on that.
Yeah.
So by the time you were up with me, that was a culmination of all those different things, and I'd been actively gigging as a keys player for a while, and getting into, you know, people like Corey Henry, who were just kind of like, they would sit at a keyboard and then whatever type of keyboard it was, they would blow your mind in some way. Yeah. But it has that feeling of really good player or improviser, just has that thing if they do something and it gets some kind of emotional gut punch out of you, like a positive gut punch. And so I was really tempted by that. It's very, very tough to get out on bass because the job of bass is different. Yeah. So when we were living together, we kept doing those little gospel jam things where I would just make up chords and you just solo over the top of it. Yeah. And it was like playing a game of like harmonic cat and mouse to try and, you know, just make something happen. And it kept happening a lot, and that was a very satisfying experience. And for anyone out there, if you've got a friend who can kind of even just very simply improvise in moving around the chords in one key, and you can sit down with them and just make something up with like no pressure behind what it is, do it, give it a go. Like, not everything has to be a full band rehearsal or like a, you know, we're going to make this into a project or something. Like, it's playing music. You don't have to. You can do 2-player games basically. You know. Yeah. And that was really cool. A cool experience to be able to do that.
Yeah. Oh, I loved it. And that's one of the things that I love when I play music with you, is that we do have a good sort of rapport musically, but a good communication between us, you know, without having to really say anything verbal. It's like a mental thing where you just can kind of switch ideas and kind of just communicate in that way. Yeah. And also really love about your playing is, like, you mentioned earlier about your ADHD and how that can sort of come across as, you didn't use the word uninhibited, but you've got like a free flow of thought that can sometimes feel like, you know, you're splurging on something, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like, you know, I know you didn't use those words, but that's what
they're accurate. They're absolutely accurate.
And that sort of musically as well, like, you can be uninhibited with what you're doing, and you're just sort of allowing ideas to flow. I think that's got to be one of the real superpowers of having ADHD, right? Because people can label any sort of label. You can start to suddenly bring across the negative connotations that something like that has to do with it, you know. Yeah. For me, I've got a drinking problem, and, you know, I haven't drank for years, and that's my solution, is not to drink. And now I feel like that is a good thing. It's turned out to be something that's an asset.
Yeah,
for me.
for sure.
Whereas before, you know, I'd stopped, or for a while after I'd stopped, I could only really look at negatives.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh, I can't do this now, I can't do that, or, you know, how am I going to socialise or whatever. And now I'm like, oh, actually, my whole world's opened up
Yeah.
in all sorts of different ways. So, like just coming back round to you with your ADHD and kind of, that's got to be one of the positives, isn't it?
For sure. I mean, for me, definitely. I think there's a classic phrase with ADHD. Once you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. Like, it's
I've not heard of that one.
It's different for everyone, and a big part of why is people grow up with whatever neurotype you have, whether it's neurotypical, ADHD, autistic, any mix, or, you know, this is a whole long conversation on its own. But
Sure.
you have a set of kind of ways that your brain behaves, things that your brain looks for, which for ADHD is usually things that are stimulating to kind of get the system in your brain to kick in, which is why I liked all the fast music and the crazy stuff. And
I can see that now.
Because it fits the, like, if I had to sit and learn the blues every day and that's the only way I could learn bass, I probably wouldn't be a bass player.
Yeah.
But after going through that whole way round of being stimulated as a kid and getting that from music, that allowed me to go back to the blues, because I see the depth of it. That is stimulating to me now. So, because my brain is ready to accept that. But before, the ADHD thing, for young people, that thing can either be nurtured, like my parents saying, yeah, go and find all the craziest music you can. Come and show us, and go and make music with your friends and stuff. And don't feel the need to put any inhibitions on that. And that allowed me to kind of grow in that way really easily. But someone else with ADHD might be like, their parents say, you have to be a doctor. I don't want you doing this music stuff. Don't, like, you know, and then they might build up kind of a defense against that bad feeling of going after that passion of theirs, or they might end up, in this is a good way that we can kind of manifest in people, they might, through that fear of kind of disappointing someone, or fear of failure, they might teach themselves a work ethic. And I think something that's unfortunate for me is, through nobody's fault, I never built up a work ethic because things came very naturally. And this can happen with a lot of ADHD kids as well, where they're really good at what they do because their brain almost does it for them. And then everything else, they're like, yeah, I don't know how to wash a sink properly, or something. You know, I'm making it up.
I'm with you there.
That is, I think, the upside and the downside that can happen with anybody. My version of it just happens to be really heavily leaning towards the creative side, because two musical parents and like an accepting household for that helped a lot as a kid. But the downside of that is also, we're from a town with like a very big music culture, but also a very big drinking culture, a very big nightlife culture. So in a similar way to you, I think the way I would put it is, I have an unhealthy relationship with substances. And I mean, when I say substances, I go all the way down to like Coca-Cola, like really simple stuff like that.
Well, it's all in there.
Yeah. And I'd find for a while, I'd be able to have like a really good relationship with alcohol, because I want to calm down with that. So I would put a stopper on that, and then be binging Coca-Colas to kind of make up for that, or then I try and put a stop on that, and then I smoke 8 million cigarettes a day. You know, like it's a hard thing to navigate especially if you're young, and if you're in a culture that both it's just around you normally, and also when you go to gigs, you're around a ton of people who are drinking. I think one thing that's really a really good thing to kind of pitch to people as a musician is, especially if you're a young musician, I'd recommend trying to be the guy who's always sober at a gig, because that will mean that you are just really reliable, because you're going to be the same person at the beginning of the gig as you were at the end.
Sure.
and it's also in your town. It might make you stick out as exceptionally reliable compared to other people.
Right.
You know,
Well,
a lot of the times it's only the drummers because they have to drive home.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've got a personal story actually attached to that, and it's one to do with you. We had a gig together somewhere in North London, and I forgot exactly where it was. And you just said to me, you were like, George, do you want to do this gig with this singer? And he was I forgot his name, but he had a really good voice. And I got on the bus to the gig. Well, I got the tube because I was living in West London, then got the bus. And I was drinking on the way to the gig. And I was pretty drunk already on the bus. And I left my pedal board on the bus. Can you remember this?
Not yet, but it's not surprising that I don't remember a really big story.
Right.
It will click at some point. Just hopefully while the camera's recording.
Yeah. Well,
on the bus,
man. I got off the bus. I had my guitar on my back, and I left my pedal board on the top deck of this bus and got off. Got to the gig. You were there, and you know, none of the rest of the band had ever met me before. And you'd kind of bigged me up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I turned up having to plug into this amp that was completely dry. It was like there was nothing going on with it, no reverb, nothing. And it was, you know, a particularly bad sounding backline amp. And I got through the gig and I actually remember like the guy said, "Oh, George, take a solo," and me just kind of being like pretty drunk with this horrible guitar sound and having lost my pedal board, you know, with hundreds of pounds of pedals on there. And anyway, we got through the gig and I didn't get offered another gig by that point.
Man, that is the danger of it. It takes is one little thing like that and you're thrown off.
For sure. But here's the fucking crazy thing about it, was that the next day I woke up with a hangover and phoned Transport for London and said I was on this bus at this time. Yeah. I've lost my guitar pedal board. And they said that the driver's handed it in. Mate, I was like, what? I could not believe it. You know, you're thinking you're on a bus in London. It happened to be the driver's last shift, last go around, and he went upstairs and checked the top deck, found my pedal board and handed it in.
And no one had stolen it before then?
No one had stolen it. And I got it back. I turned up at this at the Transport for London offices and just received it back and couldn't believe it. It was just a freak occurrence. But I can say, you know, there were other instances like that when I was living in London where someone would give me an opportunity. And I know this isn't true for everybody. Some people can have 2 or 3 beers at a gig and it doesn't bother them. Yeah. And if that's great, that's great. But I think there's a lot of merit to what you're saying. You know, I find the musicians that aren't really drinking on the gigs are doing the right stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and they're generally, more dependable, sound better. That's my experience.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like the reason drunk driving is illegal and obviously massively bad to do is because there's actually like a risk of like injury or death in that. Yeah. But one of the amazing things about music is there is kind of the most damage you can do is to your own reputation. It's a very safe world apart from that.
Sure.
You know, unless you really get on someone's wrong side and then you wake up with a broken jaw or something. But that's interpersonal stuff.
Yeah, sure.
If you're just talking about being a musician, the worst thing that can happen is you have a bad gig.
Yeah.
It's a really safe business to be in.
Yeah.
So I think the thing is it's very easy to go like, oh, well, I can drink and play. There's no problem there. But the other issue is that then you're getting used to this idea of, oh, I can just drink at work and it will always be fine.
Right.
Even if you're not telling yourself it'll always be fine, you're learning every time that something doesn't go wrong, you're learning that it's okay.
You're reinforcing it.
Yeah. And I bet that one reason that losing the pedal board story didn't have that same kind of mental impact is because that's one story of something going bad in amongst all these old stories of you drinking and gigs going great and people come up giving you really
For sure.
big compliments and stuff.
Yeah, with you. Yeah, 100%. Also, really like what you said there about it's a safe industry to be in.
Yeah.
And for the most part it is, and I think that's one of the most liberating things to learn and feel and know on a deep level, because we've, you know, if I think back to my London days in my earlier 20s, a lot of things felt quite scary, quite big, quite unknown.
Yeah.
Nowadays in my 30s, I feel like I've sort of transcended that, in the sense that, you know, I've made this direct quote of people. I'm like, it's music, it's not war.
Yeah, precisely.
You know, we're not in fight or flight situations.
No.
The biggest things that you've got to deal with actually is your own head and your own idea of what it is you either should or shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
And these days I tend to be much more along the lines of, you know, and it's going to sound a bit, but no one really cares.
No, that is the point.
That's
it doesn't
the thing.
really matter.
It doesn't really matter. People will care in the sense that they've had a great experience watching you, and hopefully, if that's big enough, you know, if that lightens someone's day, or it's a memory that's, because these memories of gigs and stuff people come to see, they can stay with them for life.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's something that it can be a big thing, in the sense that you can let a lot of light in someone's life through your playing. But you know, the other times out of 10 that you're playing, you know, no one can really give a shit or connect with what it is that you're doing, and that for me is like a good thing. Because I'm like, well, I've just got to be me now.
Yeah.
And if
exactly.
it's not like if they don't like it, give them the middle finger. It's not one of those.
Yeah.
It's more like, well, I can only do what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah. You can't drop a wrong note on someone's head. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The worst they can do is be like, "We paid money for tonight and it was bad." And you go, "I'm sorry.
Yeah, right.
I hope you can get a refund. I'm not in charge of that."
But yeah. No, I'm definitely not the manager of this situation.
Definitely someone else you got to talk to. I do actually, quickly before we move on. We're using the word safe, and I do want to make the clarification. I'm talking about the job of being on the stage and in the kind of, hopefully in the rehearsal room, because you know there is no, like, if we're talking about actual inappropriate behaviour either between people in bands, or the classic one being like people on the business side of the industry using their power to get influence on people, or right even down to the way that the crowd members will come up to you and interact with you, and I mean, the elephant in the room is this is mainly towards women, but it is, you know, it is something that everyone should feel safe from that.
I've experienced it on the other end, just real quick.
Yeah, please.
You know, about like being on stage and being physically grabbed by women.
I've
had a couple of instances, not a lot, you know, but 3 or 4 come to mind over the years where I've been grabbed inappropriately.
Yes, me too.
And it's so there is that.
I think that's the. I wouldn't say that's the other way. I'd say that's the same way. It's not so common for. I mean, now we're getting into gendered stuff, so I think it's we can only talk from our perspectives on it, and we're not exactly like, as 2 straight white English dudes, we're not exactly like the sociologists that you need to talk to get a good answer on this. But at the same time, there are some kind of self-evident things, which is like, everyone deserves to not be harassed at work.
For sure.
And whether or not it's like, because you may be in an environment where people don't take women behaving like that inappropriately, it's just a joke, or just, you know, what's the harm, I bet you love it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's other situations where it's not weird for men to be doing that to people. And then the ones that I think it should be is like, it's never appropriate to do that. Unless there's some kind of reciprocation where it's part of the whole thing. Like, if you've got some mates who are coming up to you and it's very obvious that it's a like back and forth joke, cool, go ahead, have some fun. But like, it has to be fun, and I don't think, because it's such the whole point of this industry is essentially for people to have a good time.
Mm.
It's so tied in with alcohol and kind of the partying mindset that sometimes I think those inhibitions disappear in people.
Yeah.
And I think, this is all just off hearing the word safe and wanting to be clear in what I meant. Like, this is a safe industry in terms of what your job is. But in any industry, I think you should be able to do your job without that fear of harassment.
Right. And actually teeing that off at the end there, like with that, is a good thing to say, because when I said it as well, it's not war, it's music.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we do operate in a safe industry in some aspects, but there are other aspects like you've highlighted. One, inappropriate behaviour towards musicians, or vice versa, which can all pull us, because we've all been in situations with people to greater and lesser degrees where things have got a little bit out of hand, as but other things come to mind, like you already said, and unfortunately, you probably have as well. I've been on the bad end of people that are in music purely from the business aspect. They're business people that are involved with music, you get caught in the business end of the transaction, which can sometimes be quite it can be a learning curve, and it can be something that has obstacles that you have to traverse in its own way.
You start to realise how many different types of predatory behaviour there are.
Oh, yeah.
Because
there are
some people are really subtle about it.
Yeah, for sure.
They'll give you the impression that they're on your team and they're one of the good guys.
Yeah.
And then you realise, thankfully this wasn't directly to me, but someone I was involved in, without going into any details, was essentially being told that all of this stuff was being done for them, and having essentially, there's that classic thing of businesses with two sets of books. He was basically being given a different set of like promo materials and the scale of things, but being lied to by this guy about how big his input was on it, and this guy was absolutely rinsing him for money. And he didn't find out until much later, and because of the structure of the contracts, he didn't legally have any recourse for it. Well, this is what I'm told. All I got told was we're not doing gigs anymore, and I said why, and this was what I was told.
Right. There you go.
But it makes sense that people would be financially or legally naive if what you've been spending your whole time doing is practicing music, not becoming a lawyer or a businessman.
Right. We do, because both you and I have been through the medical. Not the medical, the musician, the music education system.
Yes,
And we sat through classes that were business modules, and I don't know about you, I didn't really pay that much attention in them, and I feel like for me, the biggest learning curve really is just exposure of the industry, working in the industry, doing gigs in different capacities. Working with different people in different parts of the industry and learning sort of essentially how to be.
Yes, absolutely.
And some of the things that has really sort of been impressed on me so far is there was a few situations that I walked into that I was very naive. And I was actually just quite glad to be there.
Yeah, me too.
Truthful, and I was a little bit like, oh, this is cool. Your eyes are opened up to the world a bit, and you're like, great. And you can kind of get groomed, in a way, by the management of the situation or whatever. And you can kind of get used in a sense if you're not careful. So it's not so much about not going into these situations, because then you're just totally carving, but you just having a level of awareness. And also for me personally, something that I've learned, if you are in one of those situations, is just not being completely yourself that you would be. It's in me and you.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And I'm not saying walk around with a guard all the time and being really cagey, but just being not being like, hi, my name's George and I'm 33 years old and I've got blah 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 blah. You know, being a little bit more holding some stuff back and just being aware that not everybody has your best interests at heart in this industry or any industry for that matter.
Yeah.
But with this one,
be friendly, but don't feel the need to be friends with everyone. Make friends naturally, because this is, I hope, supporting your point to say that some people will act as if they're your friend in sometimes really extreme and personal ways. Because it's a form of, you can control someone if you are pretending to be friends with them and you're kind of have that sociopathic element of, I'm happy to manipulate someone by pretending to be friends.
100%, and that's all that stuff. And this doesn't happen every time. Of course, it doesn't.
No.
Some situations that have got business people involved work out fine, but there's some, and it's more about, when I say sort of being aware, like, it's not so much about thinking, right, well, I'm going to be guarded and I'm going to phone in performances and stuff like that, because that doesn't really help you much.
Yeah.
But it's just more about how you're being around these individuals. It's a bit of self-preservation, self-care, and realising that essentially a lot of people that you work with will have their best interests at heart. And quite often there's a lot more money going into the situation that you can be involved in than you. And you're just a cog in the wheel, you know. It is healthy.
It is healthy as well to know what type of a situation you're in. I think there are definitely a lot of people who kind of think that music is a linear thing, that you have the tiny bands that do just nothing or little pub gigs and no manager, and they do it all themselves, all the way up to the high-end professional stuff where you have a massive team and you're doing stadiums and stuff like that. But the truth is that there are bands who do arena tour stuff, who have a very small, tight-knit team, who work with local places to do those bigger shows. There's even, let's go to my obsession band, Wolfpack, like, very, very, very much an outlier, but hopefully not going to be an outlier for the future, which is, they've never had a manager, they've only ever done things on their own. The main guy has done creative ways to keep his creative control, own all the masters, no need to get out of any sticky contracts. Just doing viral kind of ideas, like they did a silent album where you streamed it overnight and it made them money, so that meant they were able to put a tour on for free because it was all paid for before it happened. That band, without any management, sold out Madison Square Garden. Do you know what I mean? Like it's this old model of thinking that you have to get a manager and you have to sign on to a really extreme contract, sign your life away to get to the big leagues. Maybe elements of that still exist, but it's not the same world anymore. So don't feel painted into a corner just because, of course people are going to take advantage when I get to the top. And it's like, no, your mental health is more important than any kind of, unless you're really obsessed with fame, you really should look after yourself before, feeling that you have to sign yourself away to business people.
100%.
And learn about contracts. That's the other thing.
Getting read by an individual that you know that has some expertise in that. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have a couple of friends that are versed in, that kind of thing.
That's handy.
And if you haven't got one of those, then you could pay a small fee to a solicitor that could take a look or whatever. But definitely not a good idea just to start signing things.
No, definitely not.
But
you could probably type your question into ChatGPT now and seriously get like an actual an answer towards that.
I only found out about ChatGPT about a month ago. And it's totally just rocked my simple little world, because I'm just now thinking, okay, I've been not wasting time, but I can save a lot of time when it comes, because I've got a teaching business and there's advertisement going into that, and there's correspondence with students and stuff. I can just type things into ChatGPT and it can get a lot of stuff going for me really quickly. So I think it can be a useful tool if it's used within the right ways. But I feel like there is a lot of like negative stuff that could come about with all of this stuff in the creative industry.
I think so. I definitely think that's the case too. I haven't actually started using ChatGPT like that, but one thing I know, and I think this is something a lot of creative people will identify with, is doing the first draft of something can sometimes be hugely time consuming. Whether it's your first draft of a song or a set of lyrics, or it's your first draft of an email to someone that's important, you want to get it right. There are tools like ChatGPT and things like that, or even apps on like phone apps like BandLab or something. You can get a good demo working together on that. And I think it's always the thing to do is try and keep yourself using those tools rather than getting into a point where you're in autopilot and you just do everything through a filter.
Sure.
Like, for example, that app GarageBand, the one that came with all the Mac. Most people probably wouldn't be able to make a professional sounding record out of that because they'll just use the presets in it. But then Grimes has done entire amazing sounding pop records just using GarageBand. So it's all of these bits of technology. It's all about how you use them. All of the people around you involved in it. It's all about how your relationship benefits both of you. So whether it's ChatGPT or an actual lawyer or even your bandmates, like if you're feeling really passionate and involved about this project but your bandmates aren't quite there, like there's no need to try and force that on them. Just try and find a relationship that works for the two of you. Maybe that drummer does just want to turn up and play. Maybe that's all he needs to do to nail it. Like, I think these interpersonal relationships are really, they're an important and slightly under-discussed thing. And then I think these kind of automatic things like ChatGPT are also going to go in that same direction because it isn't an actual person on the other side, but it's giving you the same help that a solicitor reading through a contract or a business manager, hiring someone to type up a promo for you. Like you could get ChatGPT to do that promo for you, and you might be moving faster into an industry than you would if you had to write it all out yourself. But then it would also, that going faster would help you.
There is that side of things. I think some of the worrying things about AI to me is that these days, if you get someone to do some simple math, some people will struggle based on the fact that our school system didn't really sort of, wait a minute, it did, but we all had calculators and now we've all got calculators on our phones. So that muscle of basic math is not being flexed on a regular basis. And I feel like things like ChatGPT is another layer of the calculator in the sense that, that muscle of creative writing, of putting the hard slog in, like you said, of writing that first draft or whatever, that's being slightly lost because now you can formulate things really quickly. But on the counter side of that, you've got things where, like you said, if things are being, drummed up that quickly by AI, then it's freeing you up to put your energy and effort into other aspects of your music or your business or whatever. And some of it, like I said, for me, if I'm writing something out for like a teaching thing, then it can be really useful because I'm not spending that time slowly writing something out, blah, blah, blah. I can get things quickly done and formatted quickly. Then I can put my energy into something else. But something that I wouldn't dream of using it for would be for it to like write me a song or something that, because that for me is a little bit like taking a bite out of a forbidden apple. It's
I know what you mean, for sure.
I don't want to be taking that bite because who knows what sort of Pandora's box I'm going to open with that kind of thing.
I do want to point out something funny that two white guys talking on a podcast has devolved into AI discussion without any plan at all.
No.
It happens all the time.
Being touched inappropriately at gigs and AI.
Yeah, actually.
We've got it down.
We've solved all of the modern problems, and we were just here to talk about guitar.
Well, yeah, man. I mean, I know it's called Talking Tone, but like, there's no the guitar thing is just a small thing, really.
I think as well, like,
it could be anything.
I think it is also kind of important to mention those things about dynamics we were talking about earlier, about controlling, how bright and dark your sound is, how fast and slow it is, how much that all those different things change throughout.
Yeah.
We touched on that earlier, and in a way, I think that is probably 80 to 90% of the whole thing. Of when you're talking about tone and phrasing and things like that, that's what it is. There's almost, I'm interested to hear other people's topics on it, but like if we are just talking tone, then I think that is the lion's share of the job.
Yeah,
is learn about those things, learn what makes you, like, in other people's playing, learn what makes you feel good, and then learn how to replicate that. I think John Mayer was a really good one for me because I thought he was an annoying pop guy, and then I heard Gravity for the first time, and that, funnily enough, that was actually I teach a few students in this kind of extracurricular music school. Yeah. And over the summer holidays, I gave all of the students, no matter their level, I gave them the guitar solo from Gravity to learn. So it's a very small amount of notes. It's easy to play the notes, but to get the phrasing and to get the dynamics all sounding right and trying to replicate how it actually feels, that, like, any of the kids could get to any level with it, but I know that the better kids are going to come back with a really, really good sounding solo. Sure. Some of the other ones in the middle will maybe have learned things about, like, or they've either learned how sliding up to that note can make it sound that way, hitting that note soft can make it sound that way, or they won't have learned it and they'll come back with the question, how do you do that? Yeah. And that, I think, is the answer to people who want to teach themselves how to sound more tasty, is find tasty players and go, how do they do that?
For sure. Yeah, no, right. But that's a great thing to do. Gravitate towards the stuff without a pun. that are tasty, but the three T's come to mind, which is tone, taste, and timing. Mm-hmm. If you can adapt the three T's to what you're doing, and that's going to have a slightly different meaning to everybody. And I mean that in the sense that we've all got different taste. We all feel time differently or slightly differently. Yeah. Tone, taste, and our concept of what tone is individual as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've got my personal stuff with that, and that evolves and changes with time. Yeah. But if I remind myself of the three T's as I'm playing, you wouldn't believe the change in mindset that it can bring about, given that purposeful thought towards that endeavour of tone, taste, and timing. Mm-hmm. Because I can suddenly go from, like the experience I mentioned in the rehearsal about playing too many notes, to thinking about the three T's, how I could apply that. Mm-hmm. But all this stuff aside, and they're all tools, I suppose, in the toolbox. Yeah. I'll mention two more very quick ones. One, if you're playing a stringed instrument, we can play a sequence of notes that can go on forever, whereas a horn player or a singer will run out of breath. So think like a horn player or a singer when you're playing. That way, you are taking purposeful rest and gaps in between your phrases. Yeah. You're not constantly blowing the whole time. Like John Mayer's an example, Gravity solo, there are spaces between the phrases. Yeah. It's not like him saying like a whole flurry of words at you continuously. Yeah. He's saying purposeful sentences and phrases. Yeah. And the other one that I really like is imagine you're an old man in a rocking chair.
Okay.
All right. And you're just an old man on a rocking chair with his eyes closed, swinging back and forth, and you got your guitar in your hand. Just play like what it does for me if I start to try and embody the old man in the rocking chair is a relaxed time feel.
That's cool.
And a relaxed approach
Yeah.
to playing. You know, because the old man in the rocking chair is not trying to impress anyone, and he's certainly not trying to blitz everyone.
Mm-hmm.
He's just playing, and you know, there's a couple more. There's more, but there's a few that I like.
I think I've got a similar one to that, the rocking chair one that I used a lot on gigs. This isn't one I picked up from anywhere. It was just the natural kind of way me and my friends in this band used to talk. There was a band called the Founding Fathers, and the lead singer was a killer blues man, like really virtuosic singer. Bass, guitars, drums, all incredibly close friends, and also incredible musicians.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was really groovy, funky stuff. You know, like Bill Withers, Prince, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And the thing that I then ended up joining on keyboards, which allowed them to put a load of tunes in they couldn't before. And when I would want to lock into a groove with them, we wanted it to feel good, I would just imagine like a strut, like strutting down the road to the tempo of the song.
Right.
So you have that confidence and that feeling of like sure-footedness, like you are on the beat with it, because the beat is you walking down the street, like cane in hand, if you want to go that far. Like,
pimp cane.
Yeah, big purple hat. Like that, those kind of images or like mindsets to put yourself in, they give you a purpose and intent to the music that isn't just I'm going to play C and then I'm going to play
Yeah, right. I love that.
It's a really useful one. For funk and groove stuff, like just imagining the walk down the street while you play.
Yeah.
Takes your head out of the mechanics of the instrument a little bit.
Yeah, right. That exactly, and that is because it is so much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
It is so much more than just I'm playing C or I'm playing this, you know, because when you are living in that land of cerebral movement through music, you're not really connecting with it on a deep level.
Yeah.
You're just parroting things that you know that works. And we've all been there and done it, but we know the difference when we embody the music. Whether it's times where we're just free flowing thought and we're not really having to think about it, which are the beautiful times. And then for the times that you're not instantly in that space, embodying the things that we spoke about just then, whether it's the old man in the rocking chair thing, or the pimp with the cane down the street.
Yeah, the pimp daddy strut.
The pimp daddy strut. Whether it's any of those tools, but they're things that we gather over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a new thing. All right, man. Well, we've been talking for an hour and 13, and it's been beautiful.
Yeah, that's been good
talking to you, and I feel like we could talk for another 2 hours and not run out.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm happy to come back and go for a slightly different topic someday. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing the future guests. So push a few of those past the old Spotify on screen first. I'd be happy to come back. Or
yeah, man. Well, of course, but we're not going anywhere yet. I was just saying I was gonna rope you back around to a different sort of topic. So even though we've been sort of free flowing about stuff, which is great.
Yeah.
Like your Let's Zepp project, which you've been involved with for a few years now.
Yeah, since 2017.
Yeah, right. At least 2 of those years we can count out because of the...
Yeah, that's true. The global rigmarole.
Yeah, which we won't get into.
No.
So the 2017 is when you started that. And you're doing John Paul Jones, basically, in a Led Zeppelin tribute.
Yeah. That is me playing bass, and then when I go to the keyboard, my left hand is still playing the bass, and that's going into the bass amp, so it feels like you've still got a bass player on stage. Right. Which has led to some funny moments where people have come up after gigs and gone, so who's doing the backing tracks? Who's doing the samples? I'm like, No one.
It's all me.
It's all me, geez. And then I also had to pick up mandolin as well, which is, I mean, I hate those tiny little things. I love how they
Yeah.
sound, but they're like, your fingers are spaghetti while you're playing them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I do in the band.
That's what you do, yeah. Nice. So you've done tours of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
You've been over to, I think you mentioned you did the Caribbean or something.
Yeah,
Is that right?
did a cruise through there, stopping at different islands and playing on the sea, which that ruined my timing, I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's not good for your timing.
It's not easy.
No, I've been there and know that one. So you've done that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what have you got in the books at the moment with the band? Have you got anything coming up?
Well, last year and this year we've gone some new places for the first time. Australia, we did a tour of Australia. We did Denmark and Estonia earlier this year for the first time. We're always around Germany and sometimes we'll go into France as well. We do a lot of Spain shows. We've got a Spain tour coming up actually, and it's a touring band. We go and we play the shows, and then we come back in our time off and do whatever. I think it's nice that we don't have to worry about our next album, you know. And as much as I don't have any problem with bands that do tribute stuff while the real band's still around, it is really nice to play shows for people who can't go to see the originals.
For sure.
You were talking earlier about that thing of people can take away a memory from a gig and have it for their whole lifetime. It's a really precious memory.
Yeah.
The thing I really love about the Zeppelin band is you'll have people who actually saw Led Zeppelin, the real Zeppelin.
Yeah.
They could be 60, 70 years old, maybe more. And at the end of the show, they come up to you and you can see in their eyes they feel like teenagers again.
Yeah,
It's like you've taken them back in time to something.
Yeah.
Assuming you didn't do too bad a job, but
Yeah.
there's definitely something really satisfying about bringing that out of people just by playing songs that they like, you know. So it's very satisfying in that way.
Yeah, I've had a little bit of an experience. Well, not a little bit. The same kind of experience. The rehearsal that I had last night's with an Amy Winehouse tribute.
Oh yeah, nice.
And we haven't done anything for a while. I think it was 2018 and 19. We did a couple of theatre runs around the UK, which was nice.
Yeah, you guys are good.
Yeah, we put effort in. We wanted to do Amy's music justice, and there's a lot there from Frank and Back to Black and a few other bits that are nice to play. And, horn section, etc. It's just nice, soul-y, jazzy kind of music to get your teeth into.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Amy was a pretty amazing character and musician herself. But like one thing that I found is definitely what you just said, is that there are a lot of fans out there because she's no longer around. I think she died in something like 2008 or something.
No, it's surprising how long ago it was now.
Yeah, it's like ages since she passed.
Yeah.
So obviously they can't go and see her anymore.
No.
And for some people, she's a very sacred kind of entity. She's, some people have a lot of love for her.
Oh yeah.
Just like Led Zeppelin, of course.
Yeah.
But when some of the people would be tearful or running up and hugging the band kind of thing because they liked it that much. I definitely know what you mean. It's not like having a Bruno Mars tribute. Where Bruno Mars is still touring.
Yeah, it's essentially just cheaper tickets.
It's just cheaper tickets. Yeah. And no disrespect to any Bruno Mars tributes.
Absolutely not.
I actually happened to work with one time that was really good. But yeah, it's not the same thing.
Yeah, I think with any of these bands, if the standard that the original band set was very high, like Zeppelin is for virtuoso players.
Sure.
So I'll be honest, quite often I do feel like I'm getting away with murder a bit, because people will come up and be like, wow, you're playing just like John Paul Jones. And I'm like, I know I'm not, because I can't keep up with him on some of those bits. It's physically impossible for me to keep up with some of the stuff. And he was younger than I am now.
Yeah.
For their whole, well, not their whole career, I just turned 30.
Yeah.
But that is that is a high standard you have to meet. With the Amy Winehouse stuff, you've essentially got like a revival of the old way of doing a full band.
Yeah.
With, like proper horns and very very like delicate musicianship to a high level. So you won't get people tearing up or anything if you don't deliver the goods, if you don't do the proper thing. And that's where even if the band still exists, like if Bruno Mars is still around and you're a tribute to him, you still have to be as good as Bruno to at least a drunk person. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
People will feel all of the little slips. They'll feel all of the moments where the mask comes off. Like, right. I think about it down to, not obsessively, but I just think about it down to little details. Like, I don't wear my glasses on stage, even though it's harder to see the audience and sometimes the band members, because John Paul Jones didn't, and it's just another element that might take someone out, you know. We'll even get some hired gear when we're overseas, and they'll give me a red Jaguar bass, and I want to say to them like, hey, this bass is great, but it didn't exist when Zeppelin existed. Like, if we only have more modern amps to hire, that's fine. But like when you already have to have like a modern looking keyboard to do the job, you kind of don't also want a modern looking bass, because then it starts to look like starts to look like you're not in the 70s anymore. And that's where you want to take people. That's the thing that I've kind of I think some people will kind of look down on tributes and covers, and I would only do it if they're not really putting their all into it, or at least putting the bare minimum to complete the picture. You know.
Yeah, I mean, before joining the tribute act back in 2018, I don't think I had a strong opinion on tributes, but I definitely didn't perceive myself joining one.
No.
And I felt like there can be some negative connotations when it comes to tributes. And some of them, you know, if we think about the amount of Elvis impersonators out there, or maybe the amount of Elvis impersonators that aren't that great.
Yeah.
Some of them are like really good.
Some of them are scary. Some of them are scary good.
Exactly, but then there are some that really aren't. And there are, you know, tribute acts again to any artist that really aren't that great either. But for the guys that can really play and are great musicians anyway, and then you get them together and you say, we're going to do this show on Led Zeppelin, could be anybody, you know, and then they all make that thing of, we're going to try and get this sounding and feeling like the real thing. That then for me is like, that's cool, because you're really delivering an experience. You're not just saying, you know, I'm going to get a David Bowie tribute together, we're going to get 20 David Bowie songs, you know, I'm going to kind of dress a little bit like David Bowie and here's the tunes. The band turns up and they're dressed like they do for a regular gig, and it's all a bit, that's a totally different thing in my world, because it's not an immersive experience, which is what you're trying to deliver. Cool, man. So you got your tribute. Is there any other like musical work you do? Because even though we're good friends, I don't actually know what it is that you're doing at the moment, because you've been living in London. So
I think the main thing is kind of my life kind of has just for a variety of reasons, it's just kind of pivoted towards focusing on other things. And then since then, I haven't really got back to the point yet of putting momentum behind my own projects. And I think that is kind of something I've learned. It's one of those kind of like maladjustment kind of things from not really highlighting issues in my life. One of which is just kind of being able to be the head of a project and push it through to the end. I think mainly because a lot of the time when I've done stuff like that in the past, I haven't finished it at the time because there's been some like money constraint, or I can't find the other people to get involved in the project, or I have to step away from it to earn money for myself, and then it ends up in a folder in a computer somewhere.
Yeah.
So in terms of my own stuff, really, I've got quite a lot of a blueprint of what I want to do with it. But I think first, really, what I want to learn to do is be able to finish things kind of quite quickly. So pretty soon I'm going to start doing live streams where it's just improvising or creating music just on the spot with no goal, and letting people interact with that in just fun and interesting ways, where it's kind of like we're writing a song together, rather than just me sitting kind of alone trying to kind of force myself into a creative mood or whatever, which is not a bad thing to do. But I think what's coming up for me is I want to find different ways to interactively make music using streaming, because I think that's one of those it is radio at the moment for a lot of people, and I think a lot of, especially young people, there's not a lot of musical streamers available to watch compared to like game streamers or just reaction streamers. So it feels like something that is like fertile ground for a next step, without being too much of a commitment of, I have to get this album done and finished and put all money and time into it. Apart from that, I'm teaching. I especially like teaching like adults of any skill level, because the line I always use with people is, if you practice, I can teach you to be better than me. Because I suck at practicing. I'm really I'm really bad at making myself practice.
Same.
Without if I've got a gig to practice for, then that gets me going. But
without that, it's a bit too
I mean, really, that would be getting into a whole ADHD thing again. Which is really interesting, but this isn't like talking ADHD.
No, I get you.
But
it is a factor, and it's just to quickly timestamp it with that.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel I've never enjoyed practicing.
Yeah.
It's always been playing, exploration, and there'll be things that I can pinpoint that I like, that I work on a bit.
Yes.
And there are certain things that I can sort of gravitate. Like at the moment, I'm getting my slide playing together, and I have been for a little while, past couple of months.
Nice.
And making some headway with that. But how I approach it is when I get downstairs in the morning, I make a coffee, I put the coffee on the side, and I pick up my guitar and my slide, and I play whilst I'm just drinking my coffee.
That's great.
And I'll just pay attention to how the slide sounds, how am I in tune, vibrato, little licks, blah blah blah. Certain things I'll like, certain things I won't. Things that I don't like, I'll do away with. That's my playing, full stop. Things that I don't like, I do away with it.
Yeah.
It's like I've learned how to do or be 100 different guitar players through my life of being a guitarist. But how it's ended up at me being George is mining certain things. And you've already mentioned John Mayer. I'll mention him again. It could be John Mayer. I study the way that John plays. Certain things that I'll find, integrate my own playing. It will be regurgitated out, like parroted, in a certain fashion, and then something will come of it where I'll go, I either like that or I don't. And the bits that I don't like, I do away with.
Yeah, he'd admit that he would do the same things.
Oh yeah,
he's openly talks about how this is me doing this thing, an Albert King thing, this thing and that thing, and I think people are afraid to copy, but all of the great musicians copy
100%.
From as many places as they can.
Yeah.
And just to highlight a point that you're making that I think is really important, spend time with music and sounds and things about the instrument that you don't like.
Yeah.
Because I think too many people are just trying to find what they like.
Yeah, sure.
But quite often, we learn more about what we try to
we
avoid our music sounding like.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to make a song that's like that old bubblegum pop thing, Baby Cakes. It used to drive me insane. I'm never going to like a song like that. So if I find myself making, it's an unrealistic example, but if I find myself going in that direction, by paying attention to what I use this word gently, but what I hate about it, if I pay attention to that, then I can use that to inform better creativity, better writing, and better playing in the future.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's a lot to be found from the things that you don't like, basically, because you're refining the tool.
Yes.
The end point where you meets you out of all of this information that's being gathered throughout the years is being refined more by the stuff that you've tried and that you don't like or you don't want to do.
Yeah,
there's so many things like legato playing for me, like the sort of fast hammer-on pull-off type of thing, or sweep picking done in a metal type of thing. I've tried it, but whenever I've done it, I've instantly gone, that is not how I want to sound.
Yeah.
Like, if I can hear someone else playing it and go, some people do it really well and I like the sound of it in terms of what they're doing with it. But for me, I can't make it work. It's not authentic to me or what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
So that's one example of trying something, but then going, but I'm not going to spend time doing that.
Yeah.
Because that's not me.
It is important, I think, to make the distinction as well. When we're saying, like, filtering these kind of things out and stuff like that, we're not saying that when you say you hate it today and you define your playing by that today, we're not saying lock it off for the rest of your life.
No.
You have to kind of take yourself as like a snapshot at any point.
For sure.
And go back and check what you didn't like. Because like I used to be a real musical elitist and just hated any electronic music at all.
Yeah.
To the point I even thought like keyboards were cheating because they weren't real music.
Yeah.
It's a strange opinion, but I understand why I had it.
Yeah.
But then, after a few years, I got introduced to stuff like Daft Punk and Basement Jaxx and like Groove Armada, and I was obsessed with that stuff, and I started making it within the space of 2 or 3 years as a teenager, and that's a long time, Yeah. And if I had stuck to that thing of, I said I didn't like electronic music, I said I didn't like dance stuff, said I didn't like synthesizers, then I would never have made these songs that now I'll go back and listen, even though they're well over 10 years old now, and they were made in a day, little scrappy demos. I'll listen to them and I'm really glad I made them, and I made that point in time.
Sure.
But also, as well, when I was making those electronic things, I was making songs out of just the stuff I like about electronic music. There was still 99% of it that I hated, and I wasn't copying any of those elements into these little songs I was making. I was doing like a best of from my perspective, and making kind of the music that I would want to hear released.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to look at things, like what do I want to hear today, and then if you find stuff in your playing that you're like, that's not what I want to hear today, making a note of that and thinking, okay, that's cool, I can learn something from that.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I'm totally with you there. I think one thing that comes to mind is that this idea that these days we are exposed to a huge amount of information, whether it be, just in terms of what we listen to, we've got the breadth of the spectrum, it can be, unless you manage to, filter a lot of stuff out. And I find there can be a lot of, for me personally, like it is that saying, you are what you eat. Well, you are what you listen to.
Yeah, I totally,
And, if you just listen to one kind of thing, it's going to be very present in your playing.
Yeah.
And it's about it's not about anything, I suppose. It's just more that I've found that the more diverse my tastes are, or there might be a time where I listen to loads of a certain kind of music, and then I might have had enough of that.
Yeah.
And I'll listen to a bit of something else. It's kind of, keeping the radio waves open.
Yeah.
But also mindful of that idea that there is hell of a lot of stuff going on these days, and you don't have to be a sponge for
Yeah,
absolutely everything all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can be a bit like, I'm protecting my space here.
yeah,
In the sense where I'm like, I'm not inviting that kind of thing in.
yeah, yeah. Like if modern events is driving you crazy, you take a break from the news. Like those kind of things are really useful because
Yeah.
if okay, let's say you're painting with red and blue, and you're painting away, and all you can get is reds, blues, and purples from how you blend them, and you want to add more colours in. If you don't go out and get more paint
Yeah.
and bring something from the outside, if you never leave that your art room, then you'll never be able to get other colours. You have to be able to let that in. But then if you were to like just take the whole roof off the house,
Yeah.
just let anything come in, then you're gonna have like, and then it'll just rain all over it, and if someone spills black paint all over the painting, they can't do it. So you can't. There's that thing of have an open mind but not too open.
Yeah.
I don't think that phrasing's exactly how I put it, but I think
Sure.
I try and think quite regularly about this idea of having a media diet, and like, what am I feeding myself with? Like, I will happily waste hours listening to people make dumb jokes on YouTube, and that's fun to relax with, and it's, there's some stuff I've liked since I was young that you can always go back to, but none of that is new music. None of that is exposing me to something else. None of that is building that kind of environment around me of like, oh, I'm listening to good musicians all the time, so I want to play like a good musician. It's like I'm listening to comedians all the time, and I'm not a comedian.
Yeah.
I don't do anything with that media input.
Sure. I think of it like that, in the sense where I think of it a bit like a sieve.
Mm-hmm.
A fine sieve, and through the sieve, the stuff that you don't want is coming out.
Yeah, yeah.
And then within the sieve, you've got the gold being collected.
Yeah.
Or the minerals that you want to keep.
Yeah.
So, I know what you mean. I don't think it's a good idea to say, like I said, be open but not too open.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I meant was be open but have a sieve.
Yeah, that's it.
Do you know what I mean?
That's absolutely right.
In terms of just, being aware that there's a lot going through the sieve,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have to hold on to all of that stuff if you go through.
No, learning how to let go of things is a really good idea, even in the kind of the classic like meditative sense of not holding on to things inside, or even literally just the idea of like if you're struggling with your playing or your relationship with the instrument or with music in general, you are allowed to take a break, like. And it is often the right thing to do. Like, you don't try not to hold on to the idea that if you are a musician, be it professional or otherwise, like, if it's a big part of your identity, don't let it be your whole identity. Go and do something else.
Absolutely.
Like, even if it's just learning how to cook something. Like, if it's something
100%.
as simple as that, like, learn how to cook something new for yourself. Then you have something else to do in the day. Even if you're so obsessed with music, you're playing 10 hours a day. Make 1 hour just to have lunch.
For sure. I'm so with you. I mean, I've had close friends over the years and people that I don't know so well who I've seen go to madness. They've just thrown themselves down this pursuit of making it or wanting to get to a certain destination point within music.
Yeah.
And I've found that they are just generally the most unhappy people that I've come across.
Yeah.
I find the more fulfilled musicians, or anybody, to be people that has an interest in other things.
Yeah,
it's healthy.
It is.
It's not healthy just to hold on to this torch like a candle
Mm-hmm.
and scared that anything's going to blow it out. It's like, dude, it's just music.
Yeah.
Just chill out.
Yeah.
We're only here for a short while.
Yeah.
This isn't a thing that we're going to repeat unless the Hindus are right about reincarnation.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, we could talk for hours and hours here.
That's true. We probably will when we get reincarnated.
We will, yeah. We'll sit. We'll be like two caterpillars on
Yeah.
doing this at each other. But thanks for coming and sitting and chatting with me, Jack.
It's been my pleasure.
And we will definitely do it again. At some point.
Yeah, and I'll get the live stream stuff going and give you a call about that, because I've got some very interesting ideas that will allow like musicians who can improvise to just do whatever they want and it come out sounding a bit more fully fleshed than just a normal jam night kind of thing.
Sweet.
That's very exciting. I'll let you know about that.
Yeah, please do. I'm well up for that.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, this has been the Talkin Tone podcast. We'll catch you again.
Lovely stuff. Thank you for having me.
It's all right, man.